Hello friends, this is Jiasu Bakuhatsu, and as you guys might have noticed, I've been spending a lot of my free time in the last couple months playing The Witcher 3. Actually, in fact, I spent a fair bit of my time streaming The Witcher 3 in the last couple months over on Twitch. And yeah, it's taken a very long time. It is a very long game, but I have actually finished it at this point, which is very exciting. It was... I think I clocked in around 140 hours to get through the main story of The Witcher 3, which, yeah, kind of slowed down the upload schedule on the channel here a bit over the last little while. As a result, I've just, kind of been completely absorbed in The Witcher 3, so, yeah, sorry about that, but, nevertheless, just because I've been, I've just spent so much of my time, playing this game and thinking about it, I thought I'd, kind of get a video about it and summarize, my final thoughts on The Witcher 3. So, as I guess a general summary to give you guys an idea of where I'm going with this, I absolutely loved the game, as I certainly probably would have to in order to play it for that long. I often get bored very easily when going through very long games like this. Like, I remember Metal Gear Solid 5. I was kind of ready for that to end after like 50 hours, and it went on for like 30 more. And I loved Metal Gear Solid 5 as well. In fact, it's very unusual for me to for my attention span to stick through a 50-hour game or an 80-hour game. So it's kind of a mark, I think, of it, just a game I love, if I'm able to sort of stay interested to the very end for that length of time. And that was probably the case here with Witcher 3, more so than any game I've ever played. It's actually probably the longest game I've ever completed. And I guess kind of using that as a metric, I probably would say that, The Witcher 3 is now certainly one of my favorite games of all time, possibly even just my number one, period. I don't know. I actually do intend to play through it again at some point in the near future. It's kind of just the degree to which it's kind of occupying my mind. I should have planned this out better. I guess to start off, I actually did come into The Witcher 3 having played both of the previous games, although kind of over... There's kind of a lot of time spaced between my playthroughs of each of the previous games. I played the first game years ago, and it was just... I think I saw one, I can't remember who it was. One of the people I used to follow on Twitch streamed it one night, and I thought, oh, Witcher 1, that looks pretty cool, actually. So I went out and I found a box copy at, I think, like Best Buy or something, super cheap. And I ended up playing The Witcher 1, and it was pretty decent, I thought, but there were a lot of problems I had with the game. First and foremost, I'd say it was probably the combat, which was just dreadful and really, really just boring. It's just, you'd click the mouse in time to... like the cursor would flash intermittently, and you'd have to click the mouse whenever the cursor would flash, and that's pretty much all there was to it. It was really incredibly dull. I guess a lot of the game didn't really consist of combat, though. Actually, I'd say the more serious criticism I had was that the game was exceptionally slow-paced and had a very long and meandering plot that often it seemed like nothing would happen for the longest time, to the point where I'd just completely forget what I was even doing or why I was even where I was, because things would just fail to progress for so long. I would lose track of what was supposed to be happening. And then apart from that, it was just, CD Projekt was actually, or the developers of the Witcher series, that is, were a much smaller company back in those days. So actually, The Witcher 1 was almost kind of like a small, low-budget indie title, almost. And by which I mean to say that the game was jank as hell and full of bugs, so that was another issue. Nevertheless, I didn't hate the game or anything. It had some pretty neat elements, mainly just mainly the characterization. I really liked a lot of the characters in that game. It was really, as much as the plot often seemed to just not go anywhere for the longest time, it was really cool to just kind of, hang out with, Zoltan and Shani and Dandelion and that kind of stuff. And also the side quests were often really interesting as well. There was a lot of interesting decisions, or actually, you know what? Pretty much all the good stuff I could say about the plot in The Witcher 1 is the same stuff I'd say about the plot in The Witcher 3. So we'll get to that stuff later. And then so I wasn't really enamored with The Witcher 1 at all. But I ended up playing The Witcher. I ended up buying a box copy of The Witcher 2 probably about a year after that came out, and I don't remember why. I think I must have found it like super duper cheap in stores, and it was like it was weird. The box copy of the game came with like all this stuff too. You got like the soundtrack and a player's guide, and had like all this extra like art. I think there was an art book and like I don't know, some sort of little lore book, and it was just crazy how much stuff you got in the box, and it was like on a crazy sale as well. I think I got it for like $15 or something. But it actually took me a while to get around to playing the game, actually, after I got it. It was kind of an impulse buy. But one day I actually did pop it in and give it a shot, and it was great. I loved it. But, or at least I loved what I played of it. I played it for about 14 or 15 hours, and I loved what I saw. Just like the combat was great. It was a much more focused story than the first game, which I really liked. It really fixed that aspect of the slow-paced plot of the first game, I thought, and it was a much more interesting plot I thought as well. That was a tough one to get through. Anyways, that sentence, that is. But I was having some problems running the game on my old computer, so I actually stopped playing after about 14 or 15 hours because I was getting like terrible frame rates, like usually like sub 24, and it would often dip even lower than that down to like 15 or 16, and like combat sequences with a lot of enemies, which are fairly frequent in that game, and it just got kind of annoying and frustrating. And I saw there was enough great stuff in the game that I liked that I figured, okay, I don't really want this to be my experience of this game that has so much going for it that I'm sure I would love otherwise. So I actually I shelved it for a while, and I said, I'll pick this back up once I get a new computer that can actually run it properly. And also the game, I was running the game on minimum settings and everything too, and it still ran like crap. So I actually didn't get around to actually like completely playing The Witcher 2 until not that long ago, actually. It was, I think it was like July or August last year that I got my new gaming computer, and pretty much the first thing I did was I played through The Witcher 2. I think it just took me a few days because I still love the game. It had all the great stuff that I liked from what little I played with it in the first place was still great, and great all the way through. The problem was that all the way through wasn't as much more as I thought it would be. The game was actually super short, and it turns out, like, it felt like I had hardly made any progress my first time trying to play the game on my old computer, but it turned out in the end that I was actually more than halfway through the game, because Witcher, it only took me like 20 hours to play through the game start to finish. I ended up starting over from the start when I did my second playthrough on the new computer, but still, it was like it felt incomplete, frankly. Like, it felt like I was playing through like the prologue of like what was supposed to be a much larger story. It felt just very incomplete, also a bit constrained compared to the first game as well. The environments were a bit more quite a bit smaller, a lot more sort of like interconnected pathways rather than big open fields. I don't think there were any like big open fields. It was mainly just like tight little corridor-ish pathways. It felt, linear isn't the right word. Yeah, I'd say like constrained and a lot more directed. There was a lot less of that, kind of chillax feel that the first game had, where, you're just kind of like going out, doing monster contracts, chilling with your buddies in town, and just kind of there was a lot less side content is what I was trying to get at, and there's sort of as a consequence of how short it is, you got a lot less time to sort of get to know the cast and everything. The characterization felt a little bit weaker, I thought, than in the previous game, just because you don't get to spend quite as much time with the characters and the world and everything on account of how short and incomplete the game feels. Witcher 3 pretty much got rid of all the problems I had with the previous games. It certainly doesn't feel too short or incomplete or anything like that. It certainly isn't slow and meandering and directionless like the first one. It pretty much irons out all the flaws of the previous games, and then takes all the best parts of the previous games and kind of punches them up a bit and improves them some. So and it's, like I said, probably just pretty much my favorite game now at this point. So yeah, I guess this is the part where I start trying to justify my love for this game. Or I guess to start things off, I guess the only way I can think of, I should have planned this through. I'll probably just end up doing, you know what? Okay, so the combat system in The Witcher 3 is, has absolutely nothing to do with the combat in The Witcher 1. In fact, the combat in The Witcher 2 had nothing to do with combat in The Witcher 1. In fact, the combat system in The Witcher 2 was highly criticized, which I didn't really agree with a lot of the criticisms I saw online of combat in The Witcher 2. I actually really, really liked the system, but and The Witcher 3 is kind of an evolution of combat in The Witcher 2. It was it's got a little bit of give and take. Like they actually removed a lot of stuff and kind of streamlined and simplified it in a few aspects, but they also, and that's mainly the sort of strategic aspect of, you know, sort of pre-planning and brewing potions and setting up traps and stuff. Because pretty much most of your tactical decision making in The Witcher 2 combat was pretty much occurred before the battles actually took place. They'd the townspeople would say, hey, there's monsters in that cave. So it's like before you went into the cave to fight the monsters, you'd have to get your battle plan in place, which means, you know, deciding what potions you're going to drink beforehand, because you couldn't actually pop potions in the middle of battle for quick healing or anything. You have to decide which ones you were going to take beforehand and use them, and you couldn't just take all of them because you had the toxicity meters. You had to pick and choose. And also traps were like super slow to set up in that game too. Like the animation just took forever, so you couldn't really set them up like in the heat of battle. You had to kind of plan things out beforehand, and most of that is actually taken out in The Witcher 3. Unlike The Witcher 2, you can actually just pop potions in the middle of combat in The Witcher 3. Yeah, but traps have been removed entirely, so that's completely different. And they took out a lot of the whole sort of pre-battle phase of prepping and getting your potions and traps and whatever in order, coming up with your battle plan before the fights is pretty much taken out of the game almost entirely. But it's replaced with a combat system that's a lot more fast-paced and immediate than the previous game. Like the actual combat itself in The Witcher 2 was actually very, very simple and a little slow-paced and methodical. It actually felt a lot like the combat system in Dark Souls, I thought. But Witcher 3, it's like I said, a lot more fast-paced, a lot more immediate, and so all the stuff that they took away from sort of the pre-battle phase in The Witcher 2, they sort of pretty much added all that stuff to the actual combat itself. The actual tactical options you have in combat while fighting monsters are just a lot more expansive than in the previous game. The biggest thing is you've got a new kind of dodge. Like in The Witcher 2, you just had the evasive roll, which was pretty much worked the same way it works in Dark Souls. The Witcher 3, they added I don't know what to call it. Just the dodge, I guess, I think is what they call it. That you got the dodge button, which is kind of a much faster dodge that covers less distance than the roll, but has a much quicker recovery time. So it's perfect for quick dodge and counter attack type stuff. Gives you much finer control over your positioning and lets you kind of dance around the battlefield very quickly, very smoothly. It feels just very smooth, at least once you get into it. And of course, a lot of people have mentioned how, so the Witcher series is actually based on a series of books by some Polish guy whose name I'm certain I would butcher, so I won't even try. So why did I mention that? Oh yeah, so yeah, a lot of people have talked about how sort of the way combat flows in The Witcher 3 is very true to the way it's described in the books, where they mentioned like a lot of they say like almost like dance like steps and stuff around the battlefield, and I can certainly see how that's the case here. But with that said, you still got your dodge roll, which is good for kind of the more evasive maneuvers where, sometimes you'll have like a golem or something who'll have a big wide sweeping attack that, your regular dodge can't quite cover the distance to get out of the way from that. So the dodge roll is still useful for that kind of stuff. And then on top of that, you got all your spells, which are a lot more balanced than they were in the previous game. Yeah, in The Witcher 2 is basically Yrden dominated pretty much everything, and then Quen was useful occasionally, and the others were pretty much just useless, basically. Whereas in The Witcher 3, all of the spells are much more useful. They're kind of situationally useful. Like some are still better than others, depending on sort of where you put your points. But like different monsters are weak against different spells, and also certain situations are better for different spells. It's like for example, like when enemies are all clustered together, that might be a good time for a big wave of fire or something. Or if you're in 1v1, you might be able to try to stun lock the enemy with the mind control sign, or you might, if it's a small enough enemy, you might be able to knock them down with the art. And you don't always do the same thing. It's like sometimes when you knock down an enemy, you maybe go in for the kill and finish them off, or maybe you don't have quite the space for it, so you just knock them down to give you some breathing room and attack the other guy instead. You've got so many tactical options with like all the stuff you can do. It's like you got all these different spells and sort of different ways that you can capitalize on the effects of those spells as well. And then also much finer control over your movement thanks to the new dodge. And it's just, there's so much stuff you can do in combat. It's almost overwhelming at first, which is probably why I did so terribly in a lot of the early encounters in this game. It took me quite a while to get the hang of combat in this game, just because it kind of requires some quick thinking, which is not really my strong suit. Thankfully, there's actually not exactly a tactical pause, but like if you bring up the spells and items selection, like there's a little quick menu ring that you can bring up, and that kind of slows down the combat to a crawl's pace. It's almost like a tactical pause that really you can kind of abuse that sometimes to help get your bearings. And once I started using that more, things became a lot easier. And also just once I started getting good at combat and got more of a sense of when is the best time to use the right spell, the right move, where to dodge, when to dodge against certain attacks, that kind of thing. You got to learn how to deal with each individual monster, which again feels very cool, very very Witcher-like. It's very in keeping with kind of the setting and the character that you're trying to play, where it's like this expert monster slayer, where it's like you kind of got to have to learn the monsters and actually become an expert at monsters and how to deal with them, which is what Geralt is supposed to be. So that's just pretty cool, I think, the way it all comes together in the end. It takes it takes a fair bit of finesse, a fair bit of skill, a lot of practice, but once you get good at it, it's exceptionally smooth and flows wonderfully. And I had a great time with combat. It's fun to learn to. Even when I was bad at it, I could tell that, okay, it's not the game, it's me, because there's so much more stuff I could be doing. It's almost overwhelming how much stuff you can do to handle the enemies. But once you kind of start, once you get it down, it feels great. Which it's not exactly a criticism, but I see this happen all the time in especially in action RPGs these days, where they almost always have like this reverse difficulties curve, where it's like you start out worthless, and then as you start getting skill points, you sort of become stronger faster than the enemies do, and as a result the game ends up getting easier as it goes along. And that kind of happens here, although in The Witcher 3, although not as a result of an imbalance in the skill system, but just due to the fact that as you get better in the combat system, things get easier, just as a result of you getting better at the game. I guess another criticism I've had, and actually it's probably the most serious criticism I think I'd have with not just the combat, but maybe the game in general, is that the bosses tend to be pretty bad. I thought they tended to be pretty much just degenerate into just stun locking them to death, and there's usually not much to them at all. In fact, yeah, just about every boss or just 1v1 monster encounters in general, you can just stun lock them to get death. And if you can't stun lock them, like if they're immune to magic spells or anything like that, then they tended to be just ridiculously stupid hard. And it took me some bosses took me 50 deaths to actually figure out how to actually deal with their attacks and actually fight them properly. But of course, most of that is probably due to the fact that I was playing on the hardest difficulty setting, Death March. So maybe it's a little bit more balanced in that regard on the easier settings. But yeah, there were some really, or at least a few exceptionally frustrating boss fights in the game. But yeah, I think the combat is best, I think, though, when you're dealing with kind of hordes of monsters coming at you from every direction, which is the very, very large majority of combat encounters in the game. So it's not a massive problem, but it's a bit disappointing that the bosses are so lame. And Yeah, with all that said, though, I'd say the combat system is probably just about the best I've ever seen in an action RPG. Just all the stuff you can do, all the options you have at your fingertips, and there's really good enemy variety as well. Like I said, you kind of have each enemy. You kind of have to have a different approach to each type of enemy that you're fighting, and it's like, and sort of learning the way enemies behave and how to deal with them throughout the game is a lot of the fun of learning the combat in this game. It's a great system. I don't know if I'd go so far as to say it's like the best combat in any action RPG ever, which probably sounds contradictory. Okay, basically I'm trying to think of a way to justify why Dark Souls still has better combat. It's not so much like I said. So that's the system is probably the best combat system I've ever seen in an action RPG, but it's not. It mainly comes down to the fact that Dark Souls had like much better designed bosses and enemies and very, very clever level designs that were sort of all built around very, very clever and devious just enemy positioning, level designs that all came together for very, very satisfying and tricky combat encounters. Whereas with The Witcher 3, the system is a lot more fluid and open and interesting, but the monster encounters themselves tend to be less so. Like I said, the bosses are typically pretty dull, or if the ones that aren't dull are just stupid hard for dumb reasons. And then the actual fights tend to just take place in open fields. Like terrain isn't usually much of a thing you have to deal with most of the time. So it's like basically the way I'd say it is that Witcher 3 has the better system for fighting enemies, but Dark Souls has better boss designs, enemy designs, level designs. That kind of makes the combat feel more satisfying in that game. But nevertheless, you kind of expect that, since Dark Souls combat is pretty much all there is to Dark Souls, whereas The Witcher 3 has like all this other stuff going on top of it. So maybe, I'll talk briefly about some of the overall like mechanics and systems around character building and stuff. It's generally pretty standard RPG fare. It's kind of hard to discuss actually like the skill tree, just because I've only played the game the one time right now. I did a pure spellcaster build. I went entirely down the spell tree, so it's like every single point that I spent was on empowering my spells. So I can't really comment as to like how the game is when you play a different skill build. I did a little bit of research though, looking at some other videos online of people who took different approaches to character building. And I think the way I'd say it is that in The Witcher 3, you're sort of good enough at everything that all of your different abilities are useful situationally. Like for example, even though I was a pure spellcaster on my playthrough, and I didn't do a single thing to empower like my sword attacks or anything like that, my sword attacks were still strong enough that they were still useful. I could still use them if I needed to. Say an enemy was immune to magic or something, I could still sword fight them and do well enough at it, even though I didn't really have good sword damage, because that's sort of the way the game is balanced, is that you're sort of good at everything to start out, good enough that just about all of your tactical options are viable in the right situation, and then from there you can use your skill points to become super good at particular things. So like I could sword fight pretty much any enemy in the game, just because you have decent enough sword skills even without any points. But since I put all my points into throwing fire all over the place and mind controlling enemies, that's what I was doing a lot of time in combat. And of course it's because of the way you've got a ton of different types of enemies that are sort of weak against certain things, immune to other things. So it's like there's no magic bullet solution, at least down the spell tree. Like even though most of the monster encounters in the game, I could actually just incinerate them eventually through repeated fire blasts. Once I got my stamina regeneration up, I could just like spam fire at them faster than they could. It's like the enemies would be on fire, and then I'd throw more fire at them while they're still burning. And it was a lot of fun. Or when the enemies that I couldn't light on fire, I just mind control them so that they'd smack each other around. And then the ones that I couldn't light on fire or mind control, I had to sword fight them, and those were pretty tough encounters. But nevertheless, it's there's like no magic bullet solution to everything, at least that I was able to find. So it kept the combat nice and varied. And speaking of, there's a ton of variety to the different ways you can build your character too. You got your 3 different trees, sword play, alchemy, and spells. So you can sort of take a different approach every time. You can sort of emphasize different aspects of the combat system to sort of customize your strategic approach to things, whether you want to, which of those things you want to emphasize more. It's a pretty good system. Not like the greatest character building system I've ever seen, but it seems very well balanced from at least what I've researched and what I've seen from my own playthrough, more so than a lot of other games I've seen, I've played in this genre, which is pretty good. Oh yeah, one other thing. Alchemy was, or I don't know if I'd say it's a complaint, but it's like the alchemy and crafting system is less of a factor in this game than it was in The Witcher 2. It's a much simpler system this time around, where basically in The Witcher 2 you needed to constantly be brewing, like you'd be quaffing potions and throwing bombs and traps left and right. So you needed a constant influx of materials in order to replenish your supplies. And there was often a lot of busy work that you need to do around town, where it's like, you go to the shop, look up the recipes, get all the materials you need, then meditate and build all your stuff. And you'd kind of have to do that occasionally to, restock and resupply. And it was, I didn't have a problem with it. And actually, from what I understand, it seemed pretty true to the books. Or I don't know about the books, but it seemed like a realistic approach. Like, yeah, that's probably the sort of stuff that a professional monster slayer would have to deal with. Or incidentally, that was kind of the same reason I liked the whole the sort of pre-planning aspect of the Witcher 2 combat as well. It just seemed kind of like a realistic and just interesting way of doing things. Like I said, very realistic, very immersive, very much like, yes, I am role-playing a professional monster slayer. Whereas, and in The Witcher 3, this time around they've simplified the alchemy system to where you don't need to actually constantly remake your potions and bombs and stuff. Basically, once you make a potion or a bomb the first time, you have an infinite supply from there. So you only need to make each thing once. Which is, it's not a problem. Like, I can't say that I'm super, I don't miss all that busy work from the previous game. It's certainly a much more user-friendly system, but a small consequence of that is that the looting is less of a thing in this game. This game still has loot all over the place, where you can loot just random crates and barrels around time and get all these crafting supplies, and just so many crafting supplies if you're thorough about looting every house and picking every flower along the way. And I actually did do that for the first good 15 hours through the game before I realized there's actually no point to this. I already have more supplies than I'll ever need for the rest of the game, just because you hardly need any supplies, because it doesn't really take that much to brew one of everything. I think I remember the moment where I was looking through my inventory, and I just realized I have 99 Wolfsbane in my inventory, and I think I've already made everything in the game that requires Wolfsbane. I'm literally wasting my time by picking all this stuff up along the road. And then I sort of realized, there's really no point for all of this loot to exist in the world, especially since you can very easily just buy all the materials you need anyways. So it's and it's not really a problem with the game. It's just I don't know. It's kind of in The Witcher 2, it made sense for all of these random supplies to be lying all over the place, because you need those supplies to make all of your stuff. Whereas in this game, all the random stuff is still lying all over the place for you to collect. But it's what's the point? I have no need for any of this stuff anymore. So it's not a huge problem or anything. It just felt kind of weird, and I ended up wasting a lot of time just out of habit and not realizing just sort of the way that the alchemy system worked. It's, I don't know, just sort of a random observation I guess I had. Although, with that said, there is the alchemy skill tree, which I actually don't think I even so much as looked at any point in the game. Like I said, I was entirely in magic. So, for all I know, maybe there's stuff in the alchemy tree that makes crafting and alchemy a lot more interesting, or expands it in some way. Who knows? it's just sort of funny, I think, how I like spent all this time playing in this game, and I'm almost kind of amped to go through and play it again just to see how much going into the other skill trees would change things up. And I think most of that, frankly, just from the strength of the combat system, where it's like, yeah, I did make a fair bit of use of, bombs and potions and stuff. Like I said, they were still useful, even though I didn't have any points in that tree. I wonder how much better they could get if I go through and play the game again with more of a focus on putting points into that stuff. So it's just, it's a cool system. I like how, the main thing is just the fact that I really like how everything is useful, even if you don't put points into it. And and I also really like the fact that just how amazing everything becomes once you do start putting points into them. It's like, it's like the game maintains a wide array of tactical options, but kind of just sort of leans more heavily on a few of them, depending on how you allocate your points. It's a really cool system, and again, it's really well supported, I think, by the fact that just combat is so fun, and it's so fun and engaging that I'm that much more interested to try a different approach on a second playthrough or second or third playthrough. Who knows? So yeah, that's oh my goodness, I've been blabbing for like half an hour, and we haven't even gotten into the actual main part of the game. So yeah, because the combat, or I don't know, would I say the story or the combat is the main part of the game? Whatever, we're talking about the story now. The story is I'd say kind of a mix between 1 and 2. It's like I said earlier, kind of the best of both worlds, where it's certainly much less, it doesn't quite have the laser focus of 2, where it's just like just moving from plot point to plot point. Boom, this happens here, boom, go to the next place, boom, go to the next place, and then you're done. Or I guess I'd say laser focused in that game compared to most RPGs. Like, there were side quests and, kind of side plots and that kind of stuff, but not nearly as much as The Witcher 1, which was a lot more open, and it felt like a more complete and well fleshed out and well realized world, and the environments were a lot more fun to explore, and just a lot more interesting in The Witcher 1 as well. Although the trade-off there was, of course, you had that slow and meandering plot where absolutely nothing happens for the longest time, and there's just nothing to drive me forward half the time, and it's a little too much of just sort of passively exploring these admittedly very interesting and cool environments, and towns and characters and quests and whatnot, but it doesn't really have that central focus, that central drive that I think made the story of The Witcher 2 a lot more interesting, and it just sort of compelled me forward more so than in The Witcher 1. And The Witcher 3 has pretty much all the best elements of both of those games. You've got it's much more open, much more open than frankly either game. Actually, you've got these massive environments, probably some of the biggest maps I've ever seen in this type of game, and so dense as well. There's just so much stuff to explore, so many things to do in every place, but it's it's all optional stuff. If you like that more focused approach that The Witcher 2 had, you can do that too. You can just move from main quest to main quest, and it's you can play it that way. The game is sort of as slow or as fast as you want it to be. Like I said, I took a pretty roundabout way of things. I did not a completely completionist approach on my playthrough, but I did pretty much everything. I think I did all of the side quests, or at least all the ones I could find, all of the contracts. I didn't explore every point of interest. I didn't get all of the Witcher gear diagrams and stuff, but I did pretty much all of the story stuff, all of the stuff that I found interesting, all the sub quests and stuff. And like I said, it took about 140 hours to get through. But even then, there's enough story though there. The story itself is has enough of a big epic scope, and it just spans multiple countries, these just massive countrysides, massive cities with tons of characters all over the place. All of these different things are happening. It's yet despite all that, it has kind of a central drive that The Witcher 1 just didn't. And in fact, it's kind of reminiscent of both of the previous games. There's kind of I kind of like it, frankly, the way it just kind of the overall structure of the story kind of echoes the previous games, where it's basically kind of the same thing, where you're chasing after someone for some reason or another. In The Witcher 1, it was, a wizard stole the Witcher potions from the Witcher headquarters, and so you're chasing after him to get him back. And then in The Witcher 2, you got framed for assassinating the king, so you've got to chase the assassin to try to clear your name. And now in The Witcher 3, you're chasing actually a few different people, it turns out, by the end of the game, just because, it's a 140-hour story. You gotta vary things up a little bit. But the main central focus is that you're chasing after Geralt's daughter, Ciri, or adopted daughter. I don't know. They have a weird, very complicated relationship that's really interesting. And the game does a really good job, I think, of just sort of getting, or at least I thought, getting me interested in the main story, because you're kind of chasing after Ciri, seeing and sort of talking to all these people who encountered her, and sort of getting her story secondhand. It's almost like you've got your own adventure where you're going after Ciri, but you're also, over the course of your adventures, sort of learning about this other adventure that went on before yours, and you're hearing all this stuff that Ciri did, and all the people she encountered, and you're sort of almost cleaning up after her messes along the way, but also through sort of learning about her as a character through flashbacks as well. So she's kind of also central to the story almost as much as Geralt is, and in fact you do play as Ciri through these flashback sequences. So it's just the way it was done like that. Just did a really good job of getting me interested in finding Ciri. Like, it's just the way they set it up. I was like just learning all this stuff and just constantly feeling like I was just one step behind, but finding out all this stuff that she's doing, and it's just like I got emotionally invested. I felt like I don't know, and it's just something about the aspect of, kind of Geralt trying to find his daughter, who he hasn't seen in like God knows how many years, probably at least 10 years, and trying to rescue her, because she's also on the run herself from the Wild Hunt. So it's like, you got to find her before the Wild Hunt does. So there's kind of an urgency and a drive and an emotional center to the story that I thought that certainly The Witcher 1 didn't have, and Witcher 2 kind of had it, but The Witcher 3 really has it, that sort of drive that kept me going. Like I said, I kind of marathoned this game over the course of basically a month and a half, which is unusual for a game of this length. But the way you just sort of go from, and like I mentioned, the environments are just great to explore, and a lot of that just I'd say it's like a lot of it is probably due to the fact that the game is based on these novels. So there's a lot of lore, a lot of backstory there, but it's exceptionally well realized in the game. It's just like the way the environments all kind of fit together and just kind of make sense, and there's so much backstory within those environments. There's a lot of text as well, like you're picking up like all these letters, notes, books throughout the game, and you can read them or not, but if I usually like text in these kinds of games and backstory and lore when it's done well, and there's a lot of that to find in this game, and it ties in, like I said, with the environments really well, where you'll find some abandoned ruins where it's like this wrecked, sort of like this little wrecked settlement, and then, or like a crumbling walls or a wrecked tower or something. Then you investigate and you find oh, this place actually used to be like a Witcher HQ, and then it turns out like there was a Witcher here who was on the run from some dude who backstabbed him after a contract or something. It's just like there's like little backstories to everything, and the way it's just like the lore and the backstory fit together and are well integrated in the world, and there's just so much depth to everything, so many hidden depths to uncover, and just the way it all ties together is great in that way. It just feels very, just the attention to detail here is just phenomenal. And then anyways, that was kind of got kind of sidetracked there almost. I was about to talk about the main story. I was talking about like sort of the sense of history behind the setting that's kind of delivered to you through just sort of the way the environments are laid out and the way that kind of makes sense and connects with the lore and the backstory. And so there's that sense of history there, and also the sense of history with the characters that you meet as well, because like a lot of the characters you meet in the story are characters from the books, characters from the previous games. Like you can tell that there's like these people know each other, and they sort of already have these pre-existing relationships that you're kind of being introduced to over the course of the story. And again, the game does a really great job of conveying all that to you without being like clumsy about it or anything like that. Just it all feels very natural. The writing is fantastic. It does a very good job of conveying a lot of information to you, just sort of in I don't know what to, just in a very natural way, and just in the course of regular conversations that the characters are having with each other. It just, and of course it's all superbly voice acted as well, and it just also very clever also. So it's like conveying it's like there's a lot of, what's the word, didactic, no, expository dialogue, but they do a good job of like disguising the fact that it's the expository dialogue, where it's just like, or like the plot will be set up in such a way that you, like they're explaining things to a character who doesn't know what's going on. And it's like, I never got this, like I said, it's just every single aspect of the game, from, like I said, the environments to the lore and backstory to the characters to the conversations and the setup and the stories. It just all feels very natural, very immersive. It's probably the most immersive game that I think I've ever played, more so than, and this is a very immersive genre, frankly, one of my favorite genres. Or I guess that's a tangent maybe for another separate video. Yeah, I was very impressed at the way that it, and mind you, a lot of this stuff that I'm talking about is all stuff that was good in the previous games too, like like I said, the best of both worlds, where it's like all this stuff about the environments being interesting and all the stuff to find and explore and the way it's integrated. All that was there in The Witcher 1, and to a lesser degree in The Witcher 2. And then the sort of the fantastic voice acting and dialogue and story, etc., and is all there from The Witcher 2 as well, only, you know, kind of punched up and expanded here to include even more characters, even more stuff going on. With that said, the plot is actually a little bit simpler and easier to follow this time along, which I liked, at least the main plot. There's like little side details, like you can dig into it. There are layers. You can kind of dig into it as much as you want. Like in The Witcher 2, I kind of had difficulty following the story a lot of the time. Like it was, you know, Assassins of Kings, so there was a lot of, you know, there were a lot of kingdoms and kings, and it was kind of hard to keep track of sort of who was at war with who and what were the relationships between the different nations. And it wasn't all super important to the plot, but this is all stuff that you'd encounter over the course of the game, just incidentally. And also there were two completely different paths through the game too, and there'd be like, frankly, crucial story information that you'd completely miss out on depending on which path that you went down. You kind of basically had to play through the game 2 times in order to actually get a complete picture of the story as a whole, and it was just kind of hard to follow at times. Whereas The Witcher 3 here is sort of structured a bit more, I don't know what to call it. Yeah, the way it's layered, it's set up in such a way that you can kind of you can dig into it as much as you want and make it as simple or complex as you want. Like it does a good job of hiding kind of the tiny little details from you, or at least not sort of throwing them in your face and complicating things needlessly. Those details are there if you want to, you know, explore and ask questions and do all the side quests. Then you'll kind of dig into things and get a more detailed and complete picture of what's really going on in a lot of particular aspects of the story. But if you don't want that, you can just, you know, kind of follow the main plot lines, and it's just you know, kind of, you know, like I said, it's got kind of that very simple emotional core and drive to the story, where it's just, yeah, gotta find your daughter before the wild hunt gets at her. Go. And then you just find out what happened to her along the way. And I always happen to be one step behind. And it's a good setup too for kind of more of the style of the plot of The Witcher 1, where it's like you've got that main plot, but because of the way just because of the premise, you have kind of an excuse to go exploring in these different areas. Because, like, how should I describe this? Like, The Witcher 1, there was kind of a dissonance, where it's like the plot, it felt very slow-paced when it shouldn't have. Like, Geralt should be in a big damn hurry in The Witcher 1, because, you know, he's trying to get after this wizard who stole the mutagens or whatever, so it's like, gotta get after him before he puts him to bad use. But for some reason, he just does not seem to give a shit. Like, as part of the main plot, he'll, like, be going off and doing all sorts of completely unrelated things for God knows what reason, and it just felt very awkward and strange. Whereas in this game, like I guess there is that urgency. There is a bit of that strangeness in this game, but I think Geralt actually does have a bit more of an excuse to go kind of get sidetracked, because all of the sort of side tracks and, you know, kind of the side plots and subplots are all related to the main plot. Typically, there are some that aren't, but even the ones that aren't directly related to sort of Ciri's journey and finding out what happened to her and where she went. It's like most of the subplots are centered around that. So there's a good reason for Geralt to be kind of going off on all of these little side tracks and stuff. And even the ones that aren't entirely related, they tend to be very momentous, or like very important things, stuff that's important in like kind of the greater world of, I should have looked this up. I still don't know what the world of The Witcher is called. Like, I know the different country names, but I don't know that the world itself has a name. But anyways, what was I? Oh, I lost track of it now. It's like for like a lot, almost all the time actually. The standard thing is that it's like he'll run into one of his old friends from either one of the previous games or the books, and so they have a problem that needs dealing with, and usually it's like a pretty big problem, the kind of thing where, you know, you'd be kind of a dick to leave him hanging, so he's got kind of a good reason to get sidetracked from time to time. Oh, and actually, with that said, this is like a complaint that I had like at a certain point in the game, and they kind of subverted in the end. At a point like about halfway through the game, I felt like there were like too many characters, because they got like all the characters in here, like pretty much everyone who you met over the course of the previous games, and got even the slightest bit chummy with, they're all here. And at some point, especially like in the second area you go to, or I guess the third area, once you hit Novigrad, it almost feels like just kind of a parade of cameos, basically, where it's just like one character after another, and they all have just one side quest that they need help with. Like they deliver a few lines of dialogue telling you whether they saw Ciri or not, and then if you can leave it at that, or you can get into it with them, sort of reminisce about old times, find out what their problem is and go resolve it. So it almost started to feel kind of formulaic after a while, where it's just like one character after another, and it felt just kind of weird. It's like, I remember I was real chummy with Vernon Roche in the previous game, so it's like, oh hey, it's Vernon Roche, that's awesome that he's here again, we can be buddies again, he can help me. But no, he's off doing his own thing, and you do one side quest for him, and then that's it. He's got nothing else for you. At least that's what it seemed like. They kind of subverted it in the end, though, because it was every sort of arc has a nice resolution, and all these characters are very well tied in at the end. Like, at first it feels like a parade of cameos. It's like, okay, they're just trying to cram in as many characters, like recognizable characters from the franchise, as they could. But it turns out that in the end, like, it all ties back into the main story, just the way the plot goes in the end. There's a reason for everyone to be there, and they all have a role by the time the plot is finished. And it just everything gets just tied up and wrapped up very nicely. Everything feels justified. I don't think there's any character that feels sort of superfluous, or anything that needed to be cut or felt unnecessary or anything like that. It was all, they kind of turned it around in the end, and it's like, okay, so they're just kind of, it's more of the fact that it's like they needed to introduce all these characters, reintroduce all these characters, so that it would make more sense when they sort of entered the story for real later on, and they kind of did the actual important stuff that they're there to do. And yeah, as in the previous games, characters are probably the strongest part of the story in all the Witcher games. I just like I said, and a lot of it comes down to the sense of history. Like, these characters all have pre-existing relationships with each other and with Geralt that are all just conveyed, or the player is sort of informed of these relationships very, very nicely and very well by the writing and whatnot. It does make it a bit hard to keep up sometimes, and I would say even the game does a good job of introducing things to new players, I think. Like I said, I've played the previous Witcher games, but there was a lot of stuff I forgot, given how long ago it was that I played, The Witcher 1 and even The Witcher 2. So, like, there was a lot of stuff I forgot, but the game did a good job of sort of bringing the player up to speed on all the stuff, the history of all the characters and what happened before. So it's very friendly to new players, but on the other hand, there's kind of, I don't know what to say. It feels like it still feels like you would be kind of missing out if you hadn't played the previous games. There's just like it's one thing to be told about, you know, the adventures of Geralt and Roche in the previous game and whatnot and all the stuff they did together. It's another thing to have, you know, kind of lived it and have that, and how, you know, kind of yourself had that personal connection to the character from the previous games. And I did remember, like, I remember Roche. I liked him a lot. I remember Tyler from The Witcher 1 when he shows up again, and he's great. And even some of the new characters are great as well. I think my favorite was this dude, Dijkstra, who shows up in Novigrad. He's like this, probably just about my favorite character in the game. With that said, and the side quests are so interesting too. There's absolutely none of like the MMO crap where it's like, yeah, go harvest like 6 goblin asses or whatever. It's just like absolutely none of that. Every side quest is just its own little interesting story. It's like they have like just almost like self-contained like episodes almost. You could imagine this, like these side quests, as like episodes of an ongoing series or something, just like little one-off things, and they're all have their own little twist of turns and their own little memorable side characters too. Even just like the random like quest-given peasants are often like very well written and memorable and likable or dislikable a lot of the time, and it's just great. The most common sort of side quests, or it's like almost like a medieval CSI thing, I like to say, where it's just like you're you know, sort of investigating crime scenes and trying to find out, you know, who done it or what monster done it, and it's really fun, I think, to hear Geralt kind of talk through these investigations and share his expertise on you know, just monsters and monster behaviors, and like sort of hearing how he comes to his conclusions as to what actually happened in a lot of these contracts he gets. And yeah, it's just really cool. And actually Geralt is just kind of fun to listen to in general. He's probably just about my favorite character, or my favorite main character in like RPG history. We were like this, I tell you. I got my fingers crossed here. It's just like, or this, this kept on happening when I was streaming this game too, where it's like some NPC would say something and I would react to it, and then Geralt would have the same reaction, and it was just great. We were on the same wavelength so much of the time. It was just funny. Or it's just, I can't remember what the line was. It was like, Dijkstra made some sarcastic comment. I can't remember what it was. And then I made a stupid joke about it. I can't remember what it was. This is driving me nuts. Anyways, and then afterwards, Geralt made the same stupid joke right after I did, and it was just. Of course, his version of it was more cleverly worded and funny, but still, it was just funny how we were like that. And of course, and a lot of that was just kind of coincidental. But actually, the game does have a lot of dialogue options, so you can kind of customize your own personal Geralt to a certain degree, or at least customize his personality slightly, or not so much his personality. He's like, Geralt is a predefined character with like his own personality and history and whatnot, but he sort of has a range. A range of emotions and whatnot, or a range of possible reactions and stuff, and you can kind of select between that range, and it's a somewhat small range, but like I said, you can kind of customize your Geralt a little bit. Actually, it was kind of funny that I kind of ended up playing in the end, and I didn't even intend this, but my Geralt ended up being kind of a good-hearted goofball in the end, weirdly enough. Just like a lot of the decision, like especially when it did like a lot of reflecting back on your old decisions at the end of the game, I realized like, oh yeah, Geralt's actually got kind of a sense of humor, it turns out somehow, which is just kind of cute. I thought it's just, I don't know, I liked Geralt a lot. We were very much on the same wavelength. Although with that said, like there's a bit, the range that you have to select from is a fair bit. You can make your Geralt an asshole, for example, or a badass. It's like you got a lot of decisions to make, and momentous decisions a lot of the time, that have a huge impact on the world of whatever the world of The Witcher is that I never learned the name of. So and that's pretty cool. And it's just really difficult to see. That's kind of the big thing. That's the thing that The Witcher series has been good at, like from the very beginning, is just these quests and subquests that give you these really interesting kind of moral dilemmas or even trilemmas a lot of the time where there's really no good answer in the end, or that's one, but it's not all like that. Like if it were just like, ooh, kind of tough moral decision just like time after time, it would get dull after a while. But that's not the only trick they have up their sleeve. Sometimes there are right answers and wrong answers, and it might be a good choice and a bad choice, but it might not be entirely obvious based on the information you have. Like, for example, I remember, this pissed me off at the time, but it's like in a good way. There was like I don't want to get into spoilers, but there was a side quest that involved a ghost that wanted me to help her out. And she seemed like a nice enough ghost, and she had a tragic story and stuff, but there was something, I don't know, just something weirdly off-putting, I thought, about the whole situation. I couldn't really place it, but I did some investigation and I was like really hesitant. I remember I did this on stream and I was like really hesitant. It's just like, I don't know, I'm like looking around this tower and her story checks out. It's like, it sounds like it happened exactly like she says it happens, and she seems nice enough, just something seems off though. I don't know, but in the end I decided to go ahead with it, and that fucking bitch ass Wraith tricked me in the end, and I ended up making the wrong decision, and consequences arose as a result, and I was not happy in the end about the way that ghost tricked me. Although, not that I was not unhappy with the game. It's just like the fact, and that's just a funny little interesting thing I thought that happened. And it's just like, so, those kinds of things where it's just like sometimes tough decisions where there's really no good answer, bad stuff will happen either way, or sometimes situations where you don't have all the information and you've got to make kind of a judgment call, kind of go with your gut kind of thing. And sometimes your gut will lead you wrong, and that might piss some people off, the fact that it kind of forces you to do a little bit of guesswork or a little bit of like go with your gut type decisions. Although for that matter, it could be that there's just some aspect to some of these quests that I missed. Like maybe there was some evidence in that tower that would have let me know that helping the ghost was the wrong decision. Who knows? But nevertheless, I liked that there were sometimes wrong answers, but they were still tough questions just because the information was incomplete or not immediately obvious. Just like, yeah, the quest design is brilliant, is what I'm trying to get at. I need to fucking wrap this up, and there's so much, oh my god, there's so much ground to cover with this game. It's just massive, and just like all the aspects, it's just, mind-boggling. So okay, let's get down to it. Okay. So yeah, it's so the way that your choices reflect on the plot is kind of like there's multiple endings, and there's the choices that affect the ending you get aren't immediately obvious, and I don't know, I wasn't entirely happy with the way that your choices are reflected in the ending, or that's not entirely true. Okay, like the main choice. It's tough to say. Without getting into spoilers. So it's like, there's kind of like the main plot that involves Geralt and Ciri, and that can resolve in a few different ways depending on the choices you make throughout the games, but it's not entirely obvious which choices are the significant ones and the consequences that they'll have. Like, there doesn't seem to be a strictly logical connection between those few important choices and the effect they have on the ending. So that's the one maybe criticism I would have. There's also there's still a lot of side stuff going on too. There's like other subplots that have a bearing on the ending. There's kind of like and you can sort of get as involved or not involved as you want in them. There's like actually, I was kind of funny now that I think of it. I was talking about sort of the complexity of the political situation in the north, whatever continent they're on, with like all the kings and stuff, and it was kind of hard to follow in The Witcher 2. Funnily enough, as a result of like what happened at the end of The Witcher 2, the political situation is actually very much simplified in The Witcher 3, and it's a lot easier to follow. Where it's like, that Witcher 3, Assassins of Kings, all the kings got offed in The Witcher 2. So in The Witcher 3, it's just the one remaining northern king against the Nilfgaardian Empire, who are kind of, I don't know, the main villains in The Witcher 2? I don't know, it's murky. Witcher 2 had a complicated plot, but anyways, again, just a random tangent, side observation, where it's just kind of interesting the way they kind of simplified things so that it's easier to follow, but nevertheless still really I just wanted to talk about the plot. Maybe I'll do another video where I do like a detailed, like, spoilerific discussion of all the stuff that happens and my thoughts on that. But anyways, yeah, for now I'll just say that the main hinges that I don't know. So okay, the subplots, like the side plots, are resolved satisfactorily. I think it's like the decisions that you make with regards to the side plots are very obvious what's going to happen. Like it's very obvious what consequences your decisions are going to have, or at least, if not obvious exactly what's going to happen, you get a general sense of what could happen and what the likely consequences are of those decisions. And those momentous decisions regarding the side plots are very well reflected in the ending. It just completely makes sense the way everything resolves, and the ending is great in general. And I guess that's the one thing I want to say, is that even though there's not that direct logical connection between the main decision points and the main this conclusion of the main story, I did look up the other possible main endings to the story, and all of them are satisfactory. I think, like, there is a quote unquote bad ending that can happen if you make enough of the wrong decisions, which again aren't completely obvious. It's not completely obvious at the time that they're the wrong decisions, but even then, so like you get the quote-unquote bad ending. The bad ending still resolves the story in a very satisfactory way. It's just they're all good endings. They're like a good ways to bring about a close to the story. It's just a very satisfying ending. I think there's like no, or at least that I noticed, no loose ends. Everything's wrapped up very nicely. It feels very just like a final. It has a great sense of finality and just what's the word, catharsis to it after, because yeah, there's so much harrowing stuff that happens. It's just an emotional roller coaster towards the end. Yeah, I can't talk too much detail without going into spoilers. If there's one criticism I think I might have, is that there's like too many. That's the problem I see in a lot of these types of games, where there's like too many like climactic finale-esque ending sequences, or it's just like, oh cool, we're gearing up for the big climax final showdown. Oh, that wasn't the final showdown. Okay, this is gonna be the final showdown, building up to the climax. Oh, it's not this one. We're moving on to the next one. But with that said, but it's so like from a story perspective, it seems kind of like there's too many climaxes, but on the other hand, everything that happens is logical. Like when you think about it, it wouldn't make logical sense for the story to end at like the first big climactic battle. Like you wouldn't expect it to end right there if you're thinking logically, like in story terms, just like in terms of the way these stories tend to be structured, it seems like you're building to a climactic finish. But if you think about kind of the logic of the situation, it makes sense that it wouldn't end right there. So it's kind of, and that's the sort of the way things go. It's like kind of weird that it seems to build to so many climaxes, but it's like each step along the way makes logical sense in a way that I really like, or at least in a way that satisfied me. I can't. This was a dumb idea. There was no way I can talk about all the stuff that's great about The Witcher 3 in a single video. Oh, well, we're gonna try to wrap it up. So yeah, so that's just the story. I guess you could say the three kind of main pillars of the game. You've got the combat, you've got the story and the quests and stuff, and then you've got exploring the environments, which is the other huge part of the game. Game kind of rests on, this whole genre kind of rests on those three pillars, and I think I actually talked about the environments already. There's not a lot to say. It's certainly it's like massively just huge open environments, tons of stuff to find and explore, tons of detail to get into, very immersive. I'm repeating myself here. We'll say that I've wrapped up the environments into the story discussion, and maybe just move on from there. Oh yeah, one thing I guess I didn't mention. I really like how you sometimes happen across like these little like events, or I don't know what's called. There's sort of mini quests where it's just like you're just like riding along, minding your own business, and then you hear someone yell like "help, help" from like out in the bushes or something, and then you go to investigate, and then any number of things could happen. Could be an ambush, could be a mini quest, and it's just really neat. Or there's or actually, now that I think it, I completely forgot. There were some of those that resulted in like almost like little quest lines where there's like this dude who kept on challenging me to a duel to defend the honor of Maid Bilberry or something, and I actually never got through all of those. I'm gonna have to go exploring, try to resolve that subplot. Also, there was like this elven, I think she was a prostitute, I don't know, who I kept on saving from ruffians in Novigrad in a weirdly suspicious way that never resolved. Anyways, I was just I don't know, this game, there's so much stuff in this game that happened, just so much good stuff in this game that it just occupies my mind. It's been occupying my mind over the last few days. I guess, okay, what else is there to talk about? Or I guess, okay, and of course the fundamentals, I guess. I I don't even know what I can say like in detail. It's just the graphics are great. The game looks phenomenal. It's probably the best looking game I've ever seen. Just like all the, you know, you got the checklist of, you know, standard things that you expect to comment about, and like the graphics of a video game, just like, you know, the lighting and etc. etc. It's all fantastic. Every aspect of the game is just completely masterful in its execution, from just like the you know, just the graphical fidelity, the textures, the lighting, or actually textures were a bit of a mixed bag. I had an HD texture mod to punch that up. Anyways, or actually not even just the graphical fidelity, but the designs as well. Just the all the character designs are very distinct, memorable. The costume designs are great. Just like all the awesome sets of armor, from not even the armor you equip too, but like just like, you know, the witch hunter, like the standard uniforms of the enemy soldiers, or the different factions and their soldiers just all look very cool and distinct and memorable. And just like, you know, just like the dresses, the peasant garb, it's just, costume designs are great. The monsters look really cool. It's just like all the designs are great. It's just yeah, the environments, it's just the game is, even the music, the freaking I was really surprised at this most of all, because I remember The Witcher 2 came with this, or my physical copy of The Witcher 2 came with a soundtrack, and it was a pretty decent soundtrack, I guess. It's nothing I'd like, you know, put onto my iPod and listen to regularly or anything, so it's like, you know, whatever. And I didn't even notice the music much in that game when I was playing it either. But oh my god, the music in this game is was probably just about the biggest surprise. Like all the stuff, like I said, all the stuff that's good about this game was good in the previous games. It's just even better here. The exception is the music. Music is phenomenal, just out of nowhere all of a sudden for this game. It's just like, just like the pumping, like battle themes are probably my favorite. It's just like the chanting and the drums, and it's just it just gets me pumped to slay some freaking monsters, damn it, every time I hear it. And it's just, and I noticed it at the time, and then I went and got the soundtrack afterwards, and even just to like listen to it on its own, it's still great even then. I've been like, just had the soundtrack like on loop constantly when I was actually just sort of thinking about and preparing to do this video, and it's just I was just shocked at how great it was. And then not just the battle themes, but just like, you know, the incidental, like, you know, exploring the countryside stuff where you got like just loots, and would it be a lute? Is that the correct word for that? I don't know the instruments. It's just very, very tranquil and relaxing, and just like the way it's just all the music, it's just, and I noticed it as I was like going through the game too. It's just like, oh, this is actually like, the music is always perfect for the situation. I remember just like exploring the countrysides of Vizima, riding down like just riding through the forest on my horse, and I just realized like this is the perfect music for riding through the forest on my horse here. Same with like the swamps. It's just like the music, it suits the environment very well as you're going through the game at every turn. And then it's just suitably epic for like the big boss encounters, even though, like I said, boss encounters kind of themselves kind of suck. But and yeah, the big dramatic moments in the story even have like very memorable music. It's just, yeah, the music was probably the biggest surprise actually. The music in this game is the music is the best. Like, or just, you know, not the best part of the game, but it's just like, you know, the best in general. Everything about this game, other than the boss fights, is the best in general. I can't think of a game with like a better story, better graphics, better environments, more well-designed, you know, characters, monsters, costumes, side quests, just characters, voice acting. Okay, I can maybe think of a couple that have voice acting on par, but still, this game is just on a whole another level from every other game I've played in this genre. That it puts everything else to shame. I was just, and it's just the physical, just the act of playing it. It's just great. Like I said, this game is just on my mind constantly. Just thinking back to all the little moments I had, or even big moments I had throughout the game. Just like the tough dilemmas and tough choices you have to make in all the quests, and just like all the, and just sort of the scenarios and the quests themselves. I actually remember like tons of the stuff that happened in the game. I have a pretty poor short-term memory. It's a lot of the time I just forget about stuff that I've seen. Like I'll like see a movie or play a game, and I'll completely forget about everything that I saw or played or whatever, like less than a few days later. Whereas like even now, it's been just about a week, or a week, maybe 4 or 5 days since I finished this game, and it's just all fresh in my mind, to clear as day. It's like all the cool stuff that would happen in combat. I remember like memorable mountain or monster encounters I had, where I got like, I'd use like the Axie sign to get the monsters to do silly things. and I remember, particularly strong mind-controlled buddies I had, just like funny moments in combat, interesting, just like the tranquil little conversations between characters where it's like you're getting drunk with your Witcher buddies in Kaer Morhen. That was a great scene. So many great scenes. That's probably the highlights of the game. The most memorable parts, I thought, were just like the little little moments between characters where you're just they're having conversations and getting drunk with each other, talking about old times, talking about life in general, their hopes and dreams, and what are they going to do next, and what do they think about the situation. You really get to know these characters really well, but it's like and it's all just in a really natural, well written, well voice acted. It's just it's just, or even just the simple act of, like I said, riding through the countryside on horseback, and it's just like everything comes together in a way that even makes that memorable. Like I remember the moment where I first noticed how great the music was, and it's just like, this is all perfect. So I remember that moment where I was just riding through the countryside on horseback, and it's just like, wow, this is pretty amazing. Just something as simple as that, just because like all the elements are there, all the craftsmanship and whatnot that went into this game. It's just and that's the thing. It's like, weirdly enough, just like at the end of The Witcher 2, like I remember finishing this game and I was left wanting more, which is a crazy thing. Like with The Witcher 2, I was justified because there was like hardly any game there. It felt unfinished, and like there should have been more that needed to happen to resolve that story. And I guess The Witcher 3 is all the stuff that happened to resolve the story. Like it's not like there was anything missing. It's like I was left wanting more, but yet it was like, I don't know, what more could you expect? What else is there to do? It's just, it's not so much that I wanted more or was unsatisfied. It's just the fact that I didn't want it to end. And frankly, just like talking about the game now makes me think that I think I actually might want to do another playthrough like right away. And that's just crazy to think about. It's like, and I remember MGS5, which is another game I just kept on thinking, I was constantly reminded of when I was just sort of playing and streaming this game, because that was another game, Metal Gear Solid 5, another extremely long kind of open world-ish game that I, kind of marathoned over a short period of time, and sort of streamed or recorded and commentated while I was playing. And I kept on thinking back to that, and it's like, I noticed even at the time where I was like, 50, 60, 70, 80 hours into The Witcher 3, and I was like, I should be sick of this by now. like I was sick of Metal Gear Solid 5 by now, and that was like one of my favorite games of 2015. And now here I am in The Witcher 3, and I like this, like even as much as I liked Metal Gear Solid 5, I like this even more. I like this a lot more. I was left not wanting it to be over after 140 hours. I think that's pretty high praise. And it's not like this is all like completely like new territory for me or anything either. This is what would you call it? Like the, I guess, open world fantasy action RPG thing is kind of my genre. Like there are other games, and pretty much all my favorite games of all time actually are pretty much in this same genre, where it's like Dragon's Dogma, one of my favorite games of all time. A lot of great stuff. In fact, Dragon's Dogma is another game I'd say is an example of a game that has better combat in The Witcher 3. Divinity 2 was another one that I loved, another one of my favorite games of all time. Criminally overlooked and underrated, I think. I almost never hear anyone talk about Divinity 2, which is a real shame. Anyways, those are probably the two biggest ones. And then, of course, there's Dark Souls, which doesn't really belong to the same genre entirely. But anyways, within this kind of genre, like I said, these other games, some of my favorites of all time, and Witcher 3 just kind of blows them away. It's insane. And that's to say nothing of like, I don't know, I don't want to be too controversial here. We'll say, stuff like Dragon Age, The Elder Scrolls, fucking Kingdoms of Amalur, and, other similar garbage. It's like, oh, forget about it. Who can go back to that crap from this? Like, don't get me wrong. I actually played and somewhat enjoyed most of those games. some more than others, but like I don't know if I could even go back to it and enjoy a game of that quality anymore. Like The Witcher, like I said, it just puts everything else to shame. It's just you know what? Yeah, okay, yeah. This has got to end. Nobody's gonna sit through this garbage. So yeah, that's. I'm pretty sure that's everything that I have to say about The Witcher 3 at this point. Minus maybe I might do another. Actually, I probably won't. I don't know. Post a comment. If you've gotten this far, then I guess that would indicate interest. Post a comment if you're interested in sort of me doing my sort of plot analysis and sort of detailed reactions to specific stuff in the story, where I, giving kind of my spoilerific reactions to The Witcher 3. But that's kind of my general conclusions on the game itself, which I guess is, yeah, pretty much my favorite of all time. Who'd have thunk? Like, it's even like I wasn't completely unaware of this game's reputation or anything either. Like, I don't really closely follow games media or anything. Like, I was aware of the critical consensus, mind you, but like I said, I don't put much stock in games critics these days. So I was like, okay, it could be amazing, but it also could be garbage. Like, you never know with game critics. Like, they'll praise, like I said, they'll praise garbage like those other games that I listed to high heavens, and I'll not like them nearly as much. But I was aware of the critical consensus, and actually, frankly, even people that people I like and trust in kind of the games criticism department were praising this game to no end. And even being aware of even having heard all that, I was not prepared. I was completely not prepared to enjoy this game as much as I did. And yeah, that's Witcher 3 in a nutshell. I think I've tried to give some sort of variance of, like, in summary, in conclusion, wrapping it all up. Yeah, that's it. I was not ready to enjoy this game as much as I did, and I think that's about everything I have to say about The Witcher 3 at long last. As I said, post a comment if you're at all interested in hearing kind of my detailed impressions of just like the details of the plot and spoilerific analysis in general, and I'll do that if there's any interest. Or, just post a comment giving your own reaction to the game or thoughts on the game in general, whether you agree or disagree or whatever. But nevertheless, that's my take on it. As ever, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.